Hello and welcome back. Okay, let's start. Are you ready for our last half hour? Really. He went there because he had no choice. Esto es el pasado condicional, what some teachers call the third conditional. He went there because he had no choice. To have no choice is no tener elección, ni remedio. No tengo remedio. I have to teach English because I have no choice. It's the only thing I know how to do. And at this point in my life, o sea, a estas alturas de mi vida, at this point in my life, it's too late for me to learn a new trade or a new profession. So the only thing I have to do is to teach English. And I'm not independently wealthy, which is the way of saying I don't have enough money to become independent and not work. We say independently wealthy. I'm not rich, so I have to work, and I don't know how to do anything else, so I have to be here teaching English. No tengo otra elección. I have no choice. Así lo decimos casi siempre. I have no choice. No decimos I have no other option, or I don't have any other alternative, or no tengo más remedio. I have no choice. I have no choice. Y en este caso, la frase dice, he went there because he had, pasado, no choice. Siempre se dice have o had, más no choice. He went there, fue ahí porque no tuvo más elección. He went there because he had no choice. Condicional. Pues si hubiera tenido elección, no habría ido ahí, está claro. If he had had a choice, he wouldn't have gone there. He wouldn't have gone there if he had had a choice. He became an English teacher because he knew English. Pues es de cajón. Si no hubiera sabido inglés, no podría haber sido profesor. He became an English teacher because he knew English. If he hadn't known English, he wouldn't have become an English teacher because he couldn't have become an English teacher. It's impossible to teach English if you don't know English. True or false? Well, false, okay? I remember when I came here to Spain in the 1970s, at that time, from time to time, I heard stories de terror. Horror, se dice horror en inglés. Historias de horror. Como películas de terror en inglés son películas de horror. Horror films, horror stories that sometimes in a school, the director or the principal called the physical education teacher in. Pedro, come in, sit down. Yes, Juan, what do you need? Pedro, starting next Monday, you're the English teacher in this school. Me, the English teacher? But I don't speak English. So, well, here's a book. Next Monday, you're teaching English. And Pedro had to learn to teach English. Okay? And he used a grammatical system, teaching English grammar like mathematical formulae. And you can't do that. It's teaching English like as if, como si fuera una lengua muerta. Teaching English as if it were, como si fuera. As if it were, not it was. As if it were a dead language, like Latin or Greek. Yes, or Sanskrit. Although I'm not sure if Sanskrit is a dead language completely. Okay, but he became an English teacher because he knew English. So logically, if he hadn't known English, he wouldn't have become an English teacher because he couldn't have become an English teacher, really. All right, because he didn't know English. I lost the money because I was careless. Careless is the opposite of careful. If you're careful with your money, you usually don't lose it. If you're careless with your money, you probably will lose it. Okay? So don't be careless with your money. And don't be careless at the wheel. A careless driver has accidents. A careful driver usually doesn't. Careful, careless. Careful, careless. I consider myself a careful English teacher, not a careless English teacher. I improvise, yes, but I'm careful, usually. All right? Now, I lost the money because I was careless. If I had been careful, I wouldn't have lost the money. If I hadn't been careless, I wouldn't have lost the money. Okay, analicemos la frase. Primero, si hubiera tenido cuidado o hubiera sido cuidadosos, como lo decimos en inglés, no habría perdido el dinero. If I had been careful, had Si yo hubiera sido o estado cuidadoso, if I had been careful, comma, I wouldn't have lost the money. If I had been careful, I wouldn't have. If I had been, I wouldn't have. If I had been, I wouldn't have. Cuando es negativo en ese lado. Vamos a ponerlo en afirmativo. If I had been, I would have. If I had been, I would have. If I had been, I would have. Eso no cambia en la historia del idioma inglés. Okay? I think. But it never changes in current English. Si yo hubiera sabido, if I had known, habría venido. I would have come. If I had known you were here, I would have come. Or I wouldn't have come. It never changes. The shop was damaged because there was an explosion. If there hadn't been an explosion, la palabra would no aparece nunca en el lado donde if. If there had been, si hubiera habido, hubo una explosión, there was an explosion. But if there hadn't been an explosion, the shop wouldn't, ahora sí aparece el would en la segunda parte de la frase. If there hadn't been an explosion, the shop wouldn't have been damaged. But the shop was damaged by the explosion. Yes, a lot of damage, and it requires at least 2 months of reconstruction because it was damaged by the explosion. But if there hadn't been an explosion, the shop wouldn't have been damaged. Perdón que lo repita tanto, hasta como un loro, pero es que es la única forma, porque he constatado año tras año que mis alumnos no aprenden los condicionales por un posicionamiento intelectual entendiendo el intríngulis de la frase. Lo comprenden, sí, ajá, sí, muy parecido al castellano, sí, lo entiendo. But that doesn't help, because then when they want to use it in a natural, spontaneous moment, ni soñando, no les sale. So the only way is to say it again and again and again. And probably in the next 12 months, in the next year, I'm with you every day for 2 hours, I will use the conditional probably once a week. So you will hear it 52 times in the next 52 weeks. And I will use the conditional for about 15 minutes each time. So 52 segments of 15 minutes using the conditional, just repeating it hasta que sea un sexto sentido, to hear it. Y para que no suene estructuralmente a chino. Okay, so if I hadn't been careless, I wouldn't have lost the money, okay? And if there hadn't been an explosion, the shop wouldn't have been damaged. The shop wouldn't have been damaged, but there was an explosion, and as a result, como resultado, si decimos en inglés como un resultado, as a result, the shop was damaged. All right, I walked there because I didn't have my car. I walked there. I walked there because I didn't have my car. Yeah, I didn't have my car. I walked there. Anduve allí porque no tenía mi coche. Si yo dijera aquí en España, si te dijera, no, Rafa, es que ayer anduve allí porque no tenía coche. Perfect Spanish. You just normally don't say that in Spanish. You say, fui ahí andando. O al final fui andando porque no tenía coche. Okay. Ir andando no existe en inglés. It just doesn't exist. Andar o caminar. Caminé allí. Anduve allí. I walked there. I didn't drive there. Os lo he dicho en varias ocasiones, pero usamos el verbo de locomoción como verbo principal. En español soléis usar venir o ir más el verbo de locomoción como gerundio después. Ir andando, ir a pie, ir caminando, ir en coche, ir conduciendo, ir a nado, venir corriendo, ¿ok? No, venir a nado, ¿ok? We know. Nadé, anduve, conduje, perdona. Oh, starting to lose my Spanish. I drove there. I swam there. I ran there. I dragged myself. Me arrastré hasta allí. Llegué hasta ahí arrastrándome. I dragged myself there. Always, okay, in English. And in this case, I walked there I walked there because I didn't have my car. But if I had had my car, I wouldn't have walked there because it's a little bit far. And besides, además, besides, fijaos muy bien en la S al final, porque si no es otra palabra y otro significado. Besides, it's uphill all the way. My office is about 2.5 kilometers from my house, which means I can walk there. It takes me about 25 minutes, maybe, a little bit more. It takes me about, to tell you the truth, if I walk normally, it takes me about 40 minutes to get there. Now, if my car isn't working, well, I walk. And yesterday I didn't have my car. I lent it to my son. Can you believe it? My son's car is in the shop. It's in the shop, which means it's in the repair shop. La palabra shop, además de tienda, también significa taller. Okay, taller de reparación en este caso. Repair shop or shop. Y se dice, my car is in the shop, es mi coche está en el taller. My car is in the shop. Now, my car is not in the shop. My son's car is in the shop. But my son begged me, said, Dad, can I borrow your car? And I said, why? Well, mine is in the shop. Well, can't you wait until it's ready? Well, Dad, I have a date tomorrow. You have a date? Are you, what, you with a girl? Yeah. Well, why don't you use public transport? Because I want to take her to a special restaurant. Well, use public transport. The restaurant is in Segovia. You want to go to take the girl to Segovia for dinner tomorrow? I want to take her to a special restaurant there, and I need a car. So, yesterday, my son borrowed my car, okay? And the car is in the shop in Segovia because he had a small accident. So, this morning I walked to work because I didn't have my car. I walked. Now, if I had had my car, I wouldn't have walked to work. Let's analyze this sentence like the previous ones. Si hubiera tenido mi coche, no habría ido andando andado al trabajo. No habría ido andando. If I had had, aquí tenemos had dos veces. If I had had. Cuando le decimos de corrido, we say if I had had. If I had my car, I wouldn't have walked to work. I would have driven to work. If I had had my car, comma, I wouldn't have walked to work. If I had, ese primer had es inamovible. Siempre está ahí en inglés. If I had. Luego puedes poner después el participio que más te guste. Si hubiera volado, si hubiera venido. Es igual en castellano. Si hubiera sabido, si hubiera podido, si hubiera venido, si hubiera andado, si hubiera caminado, si hubiera hablado, si hubiera, o si hubiese en español. En inglés igual. If I had, it never changes. If I had seen, if I had gone, if I had flown, if I had taken, if I had spoken, if I had drunk, if I had taught, if I had closed, if I had pointed, if I had, y luego ocúpate de decir bien el participio pasado del verbo en cuestión. Facilísimo, ¿no? That's the first part of the sentence. If I had known, si hubiera sabido que tú ibas a estar viendo el programa hoy, no habría venido. If I had known you were going to watch this, comma, I wouldn't have come. Ahora, I would, bien en afirmativo o bien en negativo, I would or I wouldn't, luego el auxiliar have, y luego otra vez un participio, I would have. Y ese would have o wouldn't have never changes, never changes. I would have come, I would have seen, I would have taken, I would have played, I would have pointed, I would have, hago la contracción. En negativo, I wouldn't have come, I wouldn't have done it. It's very easy conceptually, very, very clear. It's simply a question of mechanical practice. Boom, boom, boom. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. It's very easy. To do things with your fingers. Can you do that? Can you open your hand like that? You see? Bum, bum. Most people can't do it. It's difficult. Can you do it like that? It's very easy if you do it, if you practice. And it doesn't take much practice. Doing it 10 times in 1 minute, you're a master for the rest of your life. It's easy. You just need to practice. Now, tell me the truth and be sincere with me, eh? Be honest with me and be honest with yourself. How many times in your life have you really sat down? Siempre hablamos de sentarse cuando se va a hacer algo en serio. When was the last time in your life, or how many times in your life, have you sat down and repeated a grammatical structure in English 20, 30, or 50 times? Probably most of you, never. So don't come to me crying that your English is not good, okay? It's simply because you haven't taken the necessary steps. And the steps are very easy. They are simply a bit tedious, tedioso, pesado, to repeat 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay? But you have to do it. Because if you don't, you're wasting your time trying to learn English. Nobody learns English learning the rules. No, nobody learns English learning the rules. You have to work. You have to work. Sorry. And the conditionals are very easy. It's simply pure mechanics. Y aquí no hay excepciones. No existen excepciones en inglés. Hay reglas. Reglas de oro. Hechos en compartimentos estancos. No exceptions. Ni una fisura. Ni un remiendo por un lado. If I had known, if I had come, if I had seen, okay? Eso es una parte. Segundo, I would have gone. I would have taken. Vamos a hacer frases primero en donde ambos lados de la frase están en afirmativo. If I had known you were coming, or if I had known you were there, I would have brought a present. If I had seen you before this class, I would have invited you into the studio. If I had driven my car to Santander this morning, I wouldn't have had time. I wouldn't have had time to come here today. If I had flown to Italy last week, I would have come back yesterday. If I had called my sister last week, I would have spoken to her in English, of course. Okay, if I had called, I would have spoken. If I had flown, I would have come back. If I had, I would have. 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 Eso no cambia en lo que queda de historia con el idioma inglés. Ahora, negativo, sí. If I hadn't known, si no hubiera sabido que ibas a estar aquí, if I hadn't known you were going to, I wouldn't have. If I hadn't, I wouldn't have. If I hadn't, I wouldn't have. It's very easy. All right. I lost the money because I was careless. If I hadn't been careless, I wouldn't have lost the money. The shop was damaged. Dañado. Fijaos en la pronunciación. Damaged. Y ese t al final es mandatorio, obligatorio. We say mandatory in English. Compulsory. You must use it. The shop was damaged because there was an explosion. If there hadn't been an explosion, the shop wouldn't have been damaged. That's right. I walked there because I didn't have a car. If I had had a car, I wouldn't have walked there. I didn't call you because I didn't know you were at home. Maria, sorry, I didn't call you yesterday because I didn't know you were at home. I thought you were still in Denmark. Sorry. If I had known, otra vez, if I had, eso repito, no cambia nunca. If I had known that you were at home yesterday, I would have called you. If I had known, but I didn't. The lights went out because there was a short circuit. Yeah, the lights went out suddenly. I was teaching on television. The lights went out. The lights went out. No sé cómo decir. También se puede decir went off. Pero cuando son tantos, es general, un apagón is to go out. The lights went out because there was a short circuit. Corto circuito. Fijaos en la pronunciación. Short, no hay problema. Ahora, el problema empieza con circuit. Y si sois ingenieros, fijaos bien. And don't make the mistake in the future. Circuit, circuit. No circuit, por favor. I will wring your neck if you say circuit. Circuit, circuit. Como sí, señor. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sir. Circuit, circuit. So, the lights went out because there was a short circuit. Lógicamente, si no hubiera habido, if there hadn't been a short circuit, the lights wouldn't have gone out. The lights wouldn't have gone out if there hadn't been a short circuit. Can you believe can you imagine the type of problems you have in a television studio like this if the lights go out? But it happens sometimes. Sometimes it's a general blackout, que es un apagón. There's a general blackout in this entire area of the city, and of course, it affects these lights. Because here, I think we don't have, or they don't have, a backup system to keep the lights on in case there's a general blackout, in case the electricity goes out, or in case there's a short circuit that breaks the circuit. Yeah, we see the circuit breaker and boom, for protection, it turns off all the electricity to avoid possible fires or arising from short circuits. Okay, Rasputin. You remember Rasputin? He became famous because he could cure the Tsar's son. Do you know the story of Rasputin? In Spanish, you call him Rasputin. He was a Siberian monk. I'm not sure if he was really a monk, but I think he was an ordained monk. He was an ordained monk. Monk is monje. All right? When he was in Siberia. Strange man, very big, very tall, very overpowering, a very powerful man. Rasputin, in English we say. And he grew up in Siberia, and he spent his first adult years in Siberia. And he finally crossed the Urals and made his way to Moscow and finally to St. Petersburg. And this is probably in the year 1908, 1909, almost exactly 100 years ago, about. Rasputin reached St. Petersburg, maybe a few years later. But he died in 1916, I believe, or in 1915. Now, apparently he had certain types of hypnotic powers with his eyes, with his hands. He emanated some type of power. At least people perceived power in this man. And I don't know the details, but he managed to meet the Tsarina, the wife of the Tsar. Nicholas II was the Tsar of Russia. You remember, El Tsar. Okay, the Tsar of Russia. And his wife, Alexandra, a German princess, was the Tsarina. All right, the wife of the Tsar. And she married Nicholas, and she was the granddaughter or the grandniece, all right, of Queen Victoria of England. Now, Queen Victoria of England was a carrier, portadora, of hemophilia, which is a disease that affects males, not females. Females don't suffer hemophilia, but they carry it. And Alexandra was carrying the same problem, and she transmitted it to her son, Alexis, the future Tsar of Russia. And that was a tragedy, because when somebody suffers hemophilia, they usually die when they are young, because hemophiliacs, if they cut themselves, it doesn't scab, all right? It doesn't cure, and they bleed forever. And for a period of time, the only person who could cure the Tsar's son, Alexis, was Rasputin. He had those powers. He became very powerful in Russia. In fact, he practically controlled the royal family for about 2 years. And the question here is, Rasputin became famous because he could cure the Tsar's son. Y con esto terminamos. Pero vamos a terminar aquí con el pasado del condicional. Porque si no pudiera o si no supiera curar el hijo del zar, no se habría hecho famoso nuestro amigo Rasputin. If he hadn't been able to cure the Tsar's son, Rasputin wouldn't have become famous. Okay? Time's up. Class is over. I have to say goodbye. I'm sorry. I would love to continue, but I can't. The boss is saying, cut. So, see you tomorrow, okay? Thank you very much. Bye-bye.